Morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I think we'll have a few others join us, but because our time is limited, we might as well jump in and get started. So if you have not met him before, this is Reverend Phil Essela, who is my father and has been a pastor since 1980, what?
Four.
1984. My earliest memories is ordination service, which I do remember. And in the recent years has been working for Lutheran Hour Ministries as a fundraiser. And so pastors in their own right are fundraisers. Every pastor is a fundraiser. But then you get to certain levels where you hear like the checks that people write to Lutheran Hour Ministries on his with his requests and proddings. You enter another level of expertise. And so as someone who's really learned that in the last few years, we thought coming and teaching us about how to give in such a way that benefits you tax-wise would be worth our time. And so, yeah, Phil Essela.
Okay. This sounds like it works. Okay. Maybe it works too well. I don't know. But anyway, yes, I'm Phil Essela, and I could tell you stories about Phil. I don't think that's my purpose today, though. But my background and one of the things I get to do, I love what I get to do with Lutheran Ministries. I'm not here to sell Lutheran Ministries, by the way. While I do that, it sells itself to a great extent. It is an extremely healthy ministry that in the last 7 years has grown from reaching 51 million people every week around the world in probably almost pretty close to all countries, but has 35 different ministry centers around the world and a lot of broadcasting. It started in radio, hence the Lutheran Hour. You may have heard that on the radio sometime. And it started with that in 1930. That was the cutting edge of technology at that time. Went through TV stuff. It still does a lot of TV and satellite TV around the world and other places, but not in the U.S. so much. And then all kinds of other things that reaches people. So anyway, 7 years ago, it was reaching 51 million people a week, and now it's over 195 million people every week. So if you want to know more about Lutheran Ministries, ask me about that another time. Today, I'm trying to tell you about how you can be able to be helped with saving taxes and giving more to covenant. That's my purpose for it, for my being here. So, hey, Lord, bless us as we begin today, and we pray that your blessing would be upon us so that we may be your children, serving you with all we are and all we have. And everything we have, oh Lord, belongs to you. We get the privilege to manage it. Help us to manage it well and manage it for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. Winston Churchill said, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. And I like what Judge Learned Hand said. He was quoted a lot in lawyer circles. By the way, I was a lawyer before being a pastor. And so that's one of the things I get to do today is use both my lawyer and my pastor skills. I was both a prosecuting attorney for a while, but then a trust manager for the Lutheran Church. Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Foundation. And so today when I work for Lutheran Ministries, I get to use both of those, both plan giving stuff, because I know a lot about your remainder trusts and all kinds of other stuff like that. But then likewise taxes that I help a lot with people directly. I work a lot by phone and internet, but then teaching the rest of our people who do traveling around to go visit people, I make sure they know all about how taxes can be a benefit to people just like you and Covenant Presbyterian Church. Judge Learned Hand said, anyone can arrange his affairs so that his taxes shall be as low as possible. He is not bound to choose that pattern which pays the treasury. There's not even a patriotic duty to increase one's taxes. Over and over again, the courts have said there is nothing sinister in so arranging affairs as to keep taxes as low as possible. Everyone does it, rich and poor alike, and all do right. For nobody owes any public duty to pay more than the law demands. So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is not anything that is on the edge of what's legal or whatever, or certainly not illegal, but rather what's written right into the code and encouraging people to do. So that's what we're talking about. Hand also said, Learned Hand said, in America there are two tax systems, one for the informed and one for the uninformed. Both are legal. So I'm trying to help to inform you to legally lessen your taxes and hopefully increase giving to Covenant and maybe other charities as well. I'm going to talk about at least two things, but probably three today. First one's IRAs, and we'll talk a lot about that for a while, and then I'll talk about asset giving, because both of those impact taxes, and we'll make sure that this works for people who are not just an IRA level of giving, and maybe one day all of you will be, and then you can always plan towards that, but then also at other younger levels as well. So in your mind, you don't have to reveal your age, but in your mind, raise your hand if, this is about, first we're talking about IRAs, if you are 70 and a half years old or older. In your mind, you can do it. You don't have to raise your hand. You can if you want. I don't care. I'll raise mine because I'm there. And then secondly, in your mind, think about if you are 73 or older. And third, in your mind, think about, do you have an IRA? I'm not talking about a Roth IRA. We'll talk about that today. But an IRA, and that includes a rollover IRA. And what is a rollover IRA? If you've had a 401k, a 403b plan, or some kind of other retirement fund, once you get to 70 and a half or in that age, you can then roll it over into an IRA so that you can usefully use it and control it by how it is spent, used, etc. So think about that. And then fourth question is, do you give to Covenant or others? Hopefully you do. So if you are younger than 70 and a half, it's helpful to start thinking about what you're going to do so you can prepare for that day or help others who are in that age category. Now, and finally, one last question before we get into it is, do you itemize deductions on your 1040? Schedule A. If you don't itemize deductions, we'll talk about that first. And then if you do itemize deductions, we'll talk about that second. For many people, most people, I'm told 90% of our country does not itemize, they do not itemize deductions. So it's a lot of people that don't itemize deductions, and obviously some that do. So if you don't itemize deduction, you are a non-itemizer. If you give to charity, you get no tax value out of it. You give, and that's good, you get value out of it by what you give, but you don't get tax value out of it. If you desire to give to Covenant or others, those who are non-itemizers should especially pay attention to what we're talking about today and follow it, unless you prefer to give more money to Uncle Sam than you need to, and give more money to Uncle Sam than Covenant. See, my personal bias has been, even long before I became a pastor, was to share the gospel with people, that people would know Jesus. And that's what I get to do now too, is help people with that. But I see that as more important than the extra money Uncle Sam needs or wants. We all know, Uncle Sam's going to spend it whether he's got it or not. He can just write more checks and print more money, etc. So if you are a non-itemizer, you can still give money then to Uncle Sam, to Covenant rather than to Uncle Sam, especially once you are in that age category of 70 and a half or older, and get value out of it. Save taxes. Those who are itemizers can, you may think, well, I can deduct my gift out of my checking account to Covenant and I can use it on Schedule A so I end up in the same place. That is not quite true. It's mostly true, or much true. But I'm going to share with you today that you are always better off to give out of your IRA when you are of an age that you can do so. When you are getting an RMD, we're going to talk about that in just a second. You're always better to give out of your IRA rather than take the RMD and then write a check and get a deduction for it. So I've had many people tell me, well, I go ahead and take the income and then I get a deduction out of it, so I'm in the same place. And my answer, no, not quite. I mean, you're close, but not quite. So the other two things that you see in your notes there is that the first thing we'll talk about is an RMD, a required minimum distribution. That used to be for those who had IRAs at age 72. This year it's 73. It's going to go up to 75 soon. But what does that mean? Is that the required minimum distribution is, Uncle Sam has said the government has allowed you to put this into an IRA pre-tax earlier, so you can put your money away, have it grow, but you can't just let it grow forever. They want you to say, well, at some point you're going to start using this, so they put a required minimum distribution once you get to now age 73 is where it's required. And that means that out of that IRA, an amount will be required as income to you unless you give it away. And that's the next piece. Required minimum distribution. By the way, how's that calculated? For those of you who don't know, it's calculated on two factors. Number one is the amount that was in the IRA on December 31st of last year. So December 31st, 2022 is the amount that you had in your IRA. And the second thing is how old you are. And it starts at age 73 at 3.8% of that amount is what is your required minimum distribution. Whoever's holding your IRA will you can find out directly from them, what's my RMD? You can usually do it online, or you can call your agent, whoever you're working through, your financial advisor. They'll tell you what it is. It starts at 3.8%. By the time you get to age 90, it's 8.3%. So what does that mean? It means that over those years, gradually between 3.8% and 8.3%, it's increasing over those years. So what the government is saying is that you've got less number of years expected to live, and therefore a larger amount each year is going to be required to be taken as income by you and taxed by the government, unless you give it away. We'll talk about that in just a second. But what that means is that practically speaking, many people will tell me when they are in their 70s and well into their 80s that they say, I gave my RMD away last year and I got more money in it at the end of the year this year than I had last year. And that's usually true because their growth is greater than 3.8% or 4 or 5. They're getting maybe, on average, people are getting 8 to 10% or so in their growth funds. And so it's still increasing every year, and they're able to give a larger amount every year because their RMD is going up. Sometimes that doesn't happen, of course, because markets don't always rise. RMD, required minimum distribution. The second thing is on there is a QCD, Qualified Charitable Distribution, a QCD. That means giving directly from the fund to the charity and doesn't come to you as the middle person. If it comes to you first, that's called a taxable event, and you will then be taxed on it. And then you give it to charity. You can maybe, if you're itemizing deductions, you can take a deduction for it, but it's a taxable event. What you want to do is when you're giving to covenant is avoid that taxable event, give directly from the IRA to covenant, and that way it doesn't count as ordinary income to you. It doesn't count as income at all. And in order to do that, you can see on your listing there what you will need. We'll get to that in a second. I'll go over how you actually accomplish that. But you can see on there what covenant's ID number is, tax ID number, and so your representative will want to know who you're giving this to. You give the address, you give the tax ID number, And then they know who to send the money to directly. I do mine online because I'm 73 or older, and I give my RMDs away. And that they need to know that it is a qualified charity, but you need to know it too, and you should keep that record of what you gave to the charity in that year. If you have a tax preparer, they'll keep it for you. But if you do it yourself, make sure you keep that record of that number, etc. Because the burden of proof is always on the taxpayer, not upon the financial advisor, for instance, the Schwab or whoever it might be that's holding your fund. They aren't required to look up to see whether or not Covenant is a qualified charity, but you are. So anyway, just keep it, that kind of thing. So QCD, you can give your QCD directly or your RMD directly to charity and make it a qualified charitable distribution. So assume that I'm going to assume that most of you are going to want to give, if you have assets left in your estate at the time of your death, you'll want to give some to children or grandchildren or some other human being, brother, sister, cousin, whatever, nieces and nephews. But I assume you want to do that. And now let's think, for instance, is that I've often taught this to the people that I'm working with. Let's say you have somebody who has a house that's worth $500,000 and an IRA that's worth $500,000. And at your death, you decide, I'm going to give half of my estate to Covenant and half to my children or grandchildren, whatever. Which would you give? And our most quick reaction is, oh, give them the dollars, give them the asset, give them the IRA right away. Well, not the house. The answer is exactly backwards. You'll want to give the house, or if it's your stocks or whatever that you own in your own fund, mutual funds, or whatever, give that directly to the kids, not the IRA, because the IRA will come to them as taxable income, whereas the house, the stock, whatever it is, real estate that you own, they'll get what's called a step up in basis, so that even though it might have been taxable, it might have been capital gain and you sold it, it won't be to them. They'll get it with a step up in basis to the time of your death, and that way they basically are not going to pay any taxes, or very, very little on it, depending on how long they hold that asset before they sell it. And so the IRA is the most taxable item in your estate. I sometimes tell people that's your bad asset. It's a bad asset. It's a good asset. I can convert it to cash right away. Yes, you can. And you can spend it right away, but you pay tax on it first. So the bad asset is the one that pays tax. The good asset is the one that doesn't pay tax. Either as income or as capital gain, either one, depending on its growth. So if you have two different assets, one of which is would be taxable to you or to your children in the state, etc., to people, and one that's non-taxable, during your lifetime, if you wanted to reduce one, which did you want to reduce? The taxable one, right? Reduce that one, not the other one. Let it grow and reduce the taxable item. So therefore, during your life, as well as from your estate, the thing to think most about when you're thinking about your charities is the one that's taxable, because it won't be taxed to Covenant, or won't be taxed to any charity as you give that away. Does that make any sense so far? Any questions so far? Because I have a lot more to cover, but I just want to make sure that what I'm saying it makes sense, if it all makes sense. Okay? That's where we're at this point of view, is that. So those of you who are non-itemizers, earlier it used to be if you were not itemizing your deductions, you could still take $300 up to that much out of cash gifts to Covenant, or $600 if you were married and filing jointly, but that's no longer. So that does not exist anymore. And so any gift you make out of your checkbook to Covenant, if you're a non-itemizer, is a gift, but it's going to make you tax benefits out of it. But you can indeed do that out of your IRA. For those, now, that's non-itemizers. Let's talk a little bit about itemizers. And I suspect that some of you are itemizing deductions. I am. So what happens if you take your RMD, required minimum distribution, and then you deduct it on Schedule A? What happens is if you did that, you would take it as income. It would be part of your gross income, and on your taxable tax return, when you get down to the bottom of the first page, it'll say what your adjusted gross income is. So it'll be part of your adjusted gross income. And then you'll get to deduct it on the second page, the back page of your 1040 usually, unless they change the form every year, they do. On the back, for the itemizers, then you'll say, okay, now I deducted it, it's not part of my taxable income. But what happens if that is given, instead of the RMD, is given directly to charity out of the IRA? It's not counted as income at all. It's not counted as part of income. It's not part of adjusted gross income. Therefore, once you get to the backside, yes, you can't deduct it to taxable as a Schedule A item, and so therefore it won't reduce to on the backside, but it's already been reduced because it's not been part of income to begin with. And that still makes a difference. Do you know why? Anybody know why?
If your R&D is big enough, it can push you into a bigger tax bracket.
That's partly true. But here's even more so. If you are indeed taking, if you're 73 or older, most of you are on Social Security and Medicare. Do you know how your Medicare Part D is determined? Medicare Part D is an adjusted amount. Richer people pay more on their Medicare Part D than poorer people do. It's the way they passed the law originally. Everything else isn't so, but on Medicare Part D it is. And so Medicare Part D, your prescription drugs, that portion, if your adjusted gross, it's all based on adjusted gross income. If your adjusted gross income is lower, then they will take out less out of your Social Security check. So people don't even think, oh, I don't even see that. Well, you don't, that's true. But would you like to see your Social Security payment go up a little bit because you didn't include it as part of adjusted gross income? Yeah, I'll take a little bit more from I put it in there into the Social Security fund. I might as well get something out of it. And the more I can get out of it, the better off I am. So therefore, everybody benefits, you benefit, if you don't get it included as income at all. And I've had many people say, oh, it's hard. I say, it's not hard. You know, it's not difficult. All you gotta do is, you can do it. I can do it, I can do it out of my fund online. I can make it automatic monthly withdrawal. I can make it once a year withdrawal when I choose to for that RMD, etc. It's easy to do. And once it's done, you can forget about it. You never have to look at it again. It's easier than writing checks. Makes it easy. It comes directly as you've informed your institution, the financial institution that's holding your IRA, you've informed them, it's taken care of, you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so that's Medicare Part D. That's giving your RMD. Does that make sense so far of what I've covered? I'm going to then soon talk about giving at death, and we've talked a little bit about that, but I'll do that as well. Okay? Giving at death. If you're giving to charity at death, always start with your IRA. It doesn't mean you might give all your IRA, whatever's left, to Covenant or other charities at your death, but you always start with that. You may get more, but you always start there because that's the taxable item in your estate. Always start with that, and that's very easy to do. You just designate as beneficiary. You don't have to see your lawyer. Nobody charges you anything for that. If you change your will, you have to see your lawyer. Change your living trust, you have to see your lawyer. And it'll cost you something, but that didn't cost you anything. You can change your beneficiary of your IRA anytime you want, or change the beneficiaries of your insurance, your life insurance, etc., anytime you want, and no one charges you for it. you can just do that directly out of your IRA, saying my beneficiary is 50% of it is going to go to covenant, 100% of it is going to go to covenant. Whatever you do in it, you choose. But it's easy to change it. You can do it online yourself. You can do it by talking with your financial advisor and making that clear. Does that make sense? Easy to accomplish. Make sure that you do that at death as well, and always start with your IRA. So how do I make an IRA gift to covenant? You contact your financial advisor. If you have one, just tell them that's what you want to do. Give them the tax ID number and the address. Tell them how much you want, when you want it, and they'll take care of it. Or you can do it online as I do myself. And I give my RMD to my church. And you can do the same thing for covenant as well. Sometimes people ask me, they say, well, why has my financial advisor told me about this? And I think I know the answer, although I can't get into the minds of any individual financial advisor. But I know how lawyers get paid. I know how financial advisors get paid. And they're always thinking about, in both cases, they're thinking about, how do I get paid? How do I cover my overhead? How do I pay my staff? How do I do all that stuff? Well, the answer for that for lawyers is I'll tell you this, they get paid by the word and they get paid by the minute. You call your lawyer, and if you go 6 minutes, it's 1/10 of an hour. Bang, every 6 minutes, another 1/10 of an hour. And then you get paid by whatever their charge is per hour. And they also get paid by the word. How many words they write in their trusts and wills. Even though it might be on a boilerplate kind of thing that's on their memory, they just change the name in the middle of it and change whatever you're designated. That's the way they get paid. Financial advisors get paid by gathering and investing assets. The larger money they can invest, the more they get, even though it's a small amount based upon the amount they invest, they're getting paid by how much they have. So they're always looking for how can I get more money to gather in your estate, anyone else's assets, so that they can invest it and they can get a little bit more income. That's the way they think. That's the way they get paid. I don't blame them for doing that. That's how they already do it. So they're not thinking about how can I help Susan so that Susan can lessen the amount I get paid. They're not thinking that way. They could, and I think some do, but it's not the way they're trained, and they're just every day waking up trying to figure out how I get paid today. They're trying to figure out how do I gather assets to invest. And so it's against their interest to call you and say, Susan, I think you should be making your IRA payment, your gift to covenant directly out of your IRA and not out of your checking account. They'd be happy to have you make it out of your checking account because they don't invest that. They don't make anything out of it. They make a little bit of something out of your IRA. And so therefore they're not thinking that way. I'm not blaming people that that they are being sinister. They're just not thinking that way when they wake up in the morning. They're not looking through their list of people and saying, oh, they're now 70 and a half, or they're now 73 with an RMD. I should call them and tell them how they can lower my income. They're not thinking that way. I don't blame them, but and so when people say my financial advisor, they all know it. They all know these things because they're trained and they have to know that. And they will tell you, yes, I know how to be able to make your IRA gift directly to covenant, and I will do that for you. They'll all do that. If they don't, it's essentially, from a lawyer's perspective, it'd be malpractice. They have to do it. And so they will do it. They would do it. But anyway, so they'd much rather have you make your check out of your checkbook. Now, when you give to covenant, I have written down what's a covenant endowment fund. You have the
Permanent Funds Ministry is the name of our endowment.
Permanent Funds Ministry. My recommendation, this is now a recommendation to all of Covenant, first of all, is to market that and tell people about it so that they can know that they're putting money into the endowment fund. My recommendation to any church, I made this recommendation to my code is that by their, in this case, it'd be by the presbytery, I think, or is it by the, you don't call it church council, you call it by your session. The session. The session can designate and have a resolution passed that any gift that comes as a memorial on the death of, somebody who dies, and say, here's a memorial gift to covenant, you can make your memorial gifts to covenant. Oftentimes we'll do that. I like that. I would encourage that to have happen. Every one of you tell them, that's what I would like to have done, is make the memorial gifts to my church. That's fine. Do that. But when you get a designated memorial gift or an estate gift, have it self-designated by the session to the endowment fund, to that permanent fund. Have it given directly there, so that it's always, as much as possible, for it to grow. Why do you need it to grow? Because every charity, you can find that with every university, every whatever, they're trying to be able to increase their revenue streams, and one of those revenue streams is the endowment fund. So that when tough times come, there's still some income coming in from the endowment fund. We have an endowment fund, a single payer, single use endowment fund, where I work at Lutheran Armed Ministries. And every year their policy is 5% of the endowment fund goes directly to the ministry. You may have it, I don't know what you have in your permanent endowment fund. It might be, has to go for special projects or whatever it might be. That's fine, all that's fine. But it's helpful to have that income available in the budget every year. To know I got something coming in from the endowment fund, and as that increases, it increases the stability of this congregation's financial bottom line. It's a good thing to do. So my recommendation is to any organization is to have that come to the endowment fund. I've also known where people have, there have been, I tell you the story about a congregation I know of, but I won't give you the details, that basically had their stewardship life of the congregation ruined for about 20 years by, I'll call her Martha Schmidt, Lutheran Church, Missouri, sends a lot of journals. And so, made up name, by the way. So Martha dies and leaves a very large amount to her congregation, good sized, thriving congregation. Wonderful gift by Martha, but the problem was it went directly to the congregation, and the congregation all of a sudden had this big amount of money there, and the congregation members started to think, I don't have to give, Martha gave. And it messed up the stewardship life and the health of the congregation, because that is a necessary part of the health of a congregation, is that I feel a part of this congregation. I'm needed, I'm part of it. This is part of me that does all the stuff that Covenant does. And so you need that. And so I would also have, by the congregation, inform the congregation anytime we get an estate gift, it's going directly to the endowment fund. So it doesn't harm the congregation.
Good question.
It goes to wherever the person of the estate.
Usually they designate.
Yeah.
And generally, folks, or a lot of, it depends on who it is, but people,
Right.
They want it to go to the building, they want it to go to whatever.
But if they don't designate, does it go to the endowment?
I think so, but I don't know. We should find
I would encourage you to find that out.
Yeah, I don't know for sure either.
To do it. Because it's a healthier thing, it's going to be able to benefit you. So, now, I'm also want to talk a little bit about Roths, Roth IRAs. All these IRAs that I talked about did not include Roths. And for those of you who have children, grandchildren, whatever, anybody who is in a relatively low tax bracket at the time that they are beginning their work, it's work life, etc., Roth. Put it into a Roth. Because what happens, yes, you don't get a tax deduction for it, but when you take it out, if you put money in there at 25 and you're not going to take it out till you're 70, the bigger part of that asset is going to be all the growth. So neither the asset, the Roth put into it because it was after-tax monies, but especially all the growth, it won't be taxed. So Roth. And by the way, the same thing is true for if you have, And 529 funds for college scholarships, college, etc. If you do that for your grandkids, a 529 account. And so sometimes kids don't go to college. Sometimes kids get lots of financial aid, etc., and don't need a lot of money from outside to go to college. That's rarer today than it was in my day, but it still can happen. And so 529s can be, if a person doesn't use them for college, etc., you don't want them to take it as taxable income, it can roll over into a Roth. That was why this last tax, big tax thing that happened on December 31st of last year, signed into law, is that those 529s can be rolled into a Roth. Roll them into Roths, because then all of it can grow until they retire, and none of it will be taxed. Good thing to remember. So 529s, unused 529 funds are good for Roths. And sometimes employers will match for Roth just as well as they will for regular IRAs. I use them wherever I can. And of course, sometimes it's well worth, of course, having an IRA anyway, and sometimes you do both. That's fine. And both grow, but focus on Roths where you can, because most of the taxable income comes from the growth. Now, assets. I talked about we're going to. One more thing before we get to assets. Do any of you have money set aside? Have you set aside money for charitable giving? It's a question I like to ask. Have you set aside money for charitable giving? And there's a little thing that's going on in my mind when I ask that question. It's called a donor advised fund, a DAF. A donor advised fund, and if you have one, you know what it is. If you don't have one, don't worry about it, or you may need it at some point. What's a donor advised fund? A donor advised fund occurs sometimes for people when they have a significant wealth event. Payout from business when I retire. I get a large dollar amount, etc. And all of a sudden I'm in a much higher tax bracket, and they think, well, I give to Covenant, to other ministries, I give this amount of money, and I want to give that maybe a little bit more now this year, but I got so much more this year, a significant wealth event. You can put it into a donor advised fund. What is that? A donor advised fund says, I can put it into this fund, have Schwab or whoever it is, Fidelity, manage that fund. I will get all my income tax deduction this year in my wealth event year, as if I gave it away, because I did. A donor advised fund is now held by this foundation and they will let the donor advise them about how to spend it. So you tell them, oh, I want it, I'm thinking in my mind, my donor advised fund, I'm going to have enough this year because of this wealth event. I'm going to have enough for 5 years worth of what I normally give to Covenant and other charities. So you put it all in there, and over the next 5 years, you give it out of there. In that year when you were in a very high tax bracket, you reduced it by the large income tax deduction, and then you have that donor advised fund for it. Those are a significant time when people set up a donor advised fund. Good thing to have. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, but if you ever have that kind of thought, you can do that in the donor advised fund. Now, assets. Asset giving. If you itemize deductions, you can make a cash gift and get up to you can make a large cash gift and get up to 60% of your adjusted gross income as a deduction in any one year. You're limited to that. Now, if you had that large tax event, you gave a very large amount 1 year, you can also roll that over so in future years you can use the unused part of your deduction if you gave larger than 60% of your adjusted gross income. However, one needs to be thinking about if you are in a situation of making a gift, think about giving assets rather than cash. Most of us think about, I have more money in my checking account now, I got more income, I can give a larger amount this year. And we don't often think about, what do I own? What are my assets? My mutual fund, my stock. I retired from my company and they gave me, I was having stock in this company all these years, and now my Apple fund, because I work for Apple, Apple is now way up here in value from when I took it. I've got all this asset in stock. Don't give the cash, give stock. Give from your assets. Or I bought bought pieces of property. I bought a new home and kept my other one and rented it. It's gone up in value. I want to be able to I'm tired of managing that piece of property. I'm now at an age where it's time for me to no longer be a manager of assets like that. And so I sell it. Or I got farmland from estates from parents, grandparents, etc., whoever it might be. All of those are assets. Think about giving assets rather than cash. When I talk with people about giving from assets, they typically, if they're giving cash, I'm asking them to make a gift. If they make a gift from cash, they're thinking about what they got in their checking account or what they got available coming in. If I have them think about assets, they're not thinking about their checking account. They're thinking about comparing it to all the other assets they have. And so, if you have a reasonably wealthy person, they can think differently and give differently when they think about their assets. So I'm encouraging you to think assets, because when you give an asset, whether it be that stock, Apple stock as an example, or mutual fund growth, whatever it might be, or land, when you give that asset, you give away the capital gain. If you sold it, you'd have capital gains because it's grown. If Covenant sells it, there's no capital gain. This is beyond, so you're giving away the capital gain. You can only deduct up to 30% of your adjusted gross income in any 1 year, but you get a 5-year carryover, so you can do it over 6 years overall. But you can give that 40 acres of land from grandpa or whatever it might be, to Covenant. Covenant can sell it. I don't know whether or not the Presbyterian Church has, through the presbytery, a way to be able to take in those assets so the church doesn't have to sell it. But we have that, and I know what to do with. I used to be the manager for the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod Foundation, be their trust manager, so I know how to be able to manage those kinds of assets so that it can be given away, whether it's real estate or anything else. You can also set up charitable remainder trusts. It's beyond the scope of what we're going to talk about today. But I do know about charitable remainder unit trusts, charitable remainder annuity trusts, etc. Those are the kinds of things that you can, and I've had, for instance, I'm working with a guy and have worked with a guy in North Dakota, now working with a guy in Wisconsin who's got significant farm assets. They've been investing over the years in what's their favorite charity when they're in business for themselves? Their favorite charity is their business. Every time I get income, I'm thinking about buying some more farm equipment. I'm thinking about buying 40 acres or another 100, neighbors selling their farm. And I'll invest in that so they increase their assets. But over time, they have a lot of assets. So both of these farmers that I'm thinking of right now, set up, one's going to, the other has, set up a charitable remainder unit trust. And that way they place the asset, farmland, not all of it, but they place the significant amount of land into charitable remainder unit trust. They no longer have to manage that. We're getting basically about 1.5% of its value each year in the rentals that they made, in the rent that they rented for that farm. So if any of you own farms, you're probably getting 1.5%, maybe 2%, out of the value of the whole asset, the farm, in your rental income, and the renter gets some too. But if you put it in a charitable remainder unit trust, you can sell the land at full value, get no capital gains, and invest that full amount, and you can get 5 or 6% per year out of that. And you get an income tax deduction and no capital gains tax. That's just a brief picture of what charitable remainder trusts are about. If you go see your tax advisor if you are interested in thinking about doing anything like that. And that can happen with stock as well as with real estate, etc. So, how am I doing with time? About time. Questions? Now, my goal is that you give more to Covenant and less to Uncle Sam. By the way, you have an estate plan. You have one, whether you've written it or not. Uncle Sam wrote it for you, or the government, well, in this case, the state of Ohio. C.S. Lewis said, "I do not believe one can settle how much we ought to give. I'm afraid the only safe rule is to give more than we can spare." I like C.S. Lewis. Amen. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Really. So Joe, was this recorded?
Yeah. So we'll post it later today.
Yeah, it'll be on the. That's super.
Thanks, Dad.
Appreciate that. Learned a lot.